Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. And this is the Get Literate podcast. On this podcast, we explore the power of leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to make our lives better. And no matter what better means to you, the pages inside books and notebooks can help us get there. So, each week, we'll mix together books, notebooks, mindful practices, and creativity to cultivate a life we love. Now, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, Stephanie here, hopping in quickly before the real episode begins today. Right now, we are on the verge of our summer reading season. That means we are getting our books ready that we want to read. We're thinking about the luxurious time that we are going to spend relaxing and reading. And that means we have to think about our reading rules. Yes, our reading rules. That's what we're tackling here on the episode today. What are those conscious and unconscious reading rules that drive our reading life? Rules like you can only read one book at a time. You must go from start to finish. You can't abandon a book. Don't dog-ear those pages. Don't write in the books, right? We all have our reading rules that knowingly or unknowingly decide how our reading life will be. And if we're going to kick off a wonderful season of summer reading, then we need to think about what those reading rules are and if they're serving us. And if they are, we can make them better. And if they aren't, we can let them be. So today I'm talking with Christie Zimmer. Christie has been on the podcast before as we talked about her beautiful journal printables. And together we've created a printable that is going to help you think about and reflect on your reading rules in order to make the best summer reading season ever. And if you'd like, you can join me for my summer reading launch party. It's June 17th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to talk all things summer reading. We're going to share books, we're going to swap titles, and there'll be lots of bookish prizes too. So if you'd like to join me for that, be sure to take a look at the show notes, and with a quick email, you can sign up. Okay, now let's get to the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Get Literate podcast. Today I am so excited to welcome back a special guest. Christie Zimmer is here with us today. Christie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here again. Very excited about our chat.
Me too. Now, I just want to take a minute to reintroduce you to readers or listeners and touch upon the first episode that we recorded together to give those that might haven't listened yet a little bit of context for what we're going to talk about today. So back in episode 50, we got together for a conversation on how to find your journaling path. And we talked about a lot. We talked about why and how we journal, when we journal, what we journal about, and all sorts of things in between. One of the things I love about your journaling work and that we talked about on that podcast episode are your inspiring printables. Now, the word printables doesn't really do these beautiful pages any justice. They're bright, they're colorful, there's lots of white space so that we can reflect. And on the episode, we talked about my favorite printables of yours. My top favorite still so far are the alphabet inspired journal pages. I love the pages that help us reverse engineer our day. And I think my newest favorite is going to be the beginning, middle, and the end trio. I just love them all. And I'm hoping that listeners, if they haven't already, will give them the information they need to hop onto your website so they can take a look. But you also have a set of journal pages that you specially design in collaboration with other people. And on that episode, I may have put a bug in your ear that doing some sort of collaboration around a journal page on reading would definitely be at the top of my wish list. And my wish list came true. You're back. We are here, and we are going to talk about our brand new journal collaboration. I am so excited. I am so excited. So I'll turn it over to you now. I've spoken a lot already. Let's talk a bit more in depth about you and your journaling philosophy, just to give everybody a quick little recap. What is the why behind the work that you do and the kinds of journal pages that you create for others?
Okay. So that's a huge question for me. There are so many whys behind my journaling. There are so many things that we can do in our journals to make our life better, to learn more about ourselves. And so for me, it all starts with reflection. And that's at the core of the work that we do in our journal. So reflection is my favorite definition, and we discussed this in the last podcast, but my favorite definition of reflection is thinking with a purpose. So it's more than just recording in your journal experiences or remembering experiences as they happen, but it's also making sense of those experiences and then deciding what to do with that information. When you decide what your experiences mean to you, you can use that information to decide what you want to do next, how you want to carry forward what you've learned in one experience into the next experience. And so you kind of what it leads to in my own journaling is I have kind of there are three things I want to do in my journal. There are three whys. So I want to learn. I want to learn more about myself, more about the world around me. I want to learn about my own experiences, like make the most of those experiences, take as much from those experiences as I can. And then I want to use that information to act. So I need my journal, or I really use my journal as a tool to support forward movement, to support action that moves me forward. So it could be goal setting, it could be discovering things that really work well for me so that I can use them going forward. And then finally, and I think this is, another really important aspect of journaling is I use my journal to remember. So to remember kind of what I did last time, what worked last time, so I can carry that forward. And also to remember the things that matter, the experiences that brought me joy, the things that I don't want to forget. Our lives are so busy, they move so quickly. It's really wonderful to sit down sometimes and just record an experience that was really meaningful with the people that I love, or that where I discovered something about myself or the world that I hadn't realized before, which can be so exciting. All these little details, to using my journal to really pick up on the little details that enrich my life, and deepen my experience of the world. Journaling, there are so many things you can do with your journal. It can really expand your sense of the world, and I just love that. So in terms of bringing that to my pages, that's exactly what I try to bring to every journal page that I create. I try to create pages that look at experiences, at all of our experiences from lots of different perspectives, that prompt journalers to pick up on details they might not have noticed before, and to do it in a really kind of lighthearted, curious, affirming, positive way that really motivates us to keep noticing these things, to keep using our journals to move us forward and to support the actions that we want to take towards the things that matter most to us.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's accurate, right? For those that haven't looked at Christie's pages yet, as someone who has, your mission, your goal, your philosophy, like you can see it on every page after listening to you talk. And I tried to think back in the last episode, how did I find you? Like, did I find you on Instagram? Did I find you on a Google search? Like, where did I find these pages? And I still can't quite exactly remember, but I do remember that it was in a phase of my notebooking where I felt stuck. For me, I can easily fall into a notebooking rut where I tend to write about the same thing all the time. And it's usually whatever is top of mind, whatever is bothering me, or whatever is annoying me, or I just can't work through on my own life. I put it on the page. And after a while, that cannot feel very good. It can feel like you know, you're stuck in life, you're stuck on the page. And I do remember doing lots of Googling and searching for ways to get out of that. And that's what I do believe your pages do that, because there are these little sparks that just get you to think differently. Think differently on the page, think differently in your life. And it's so, what's the word I want? I don't know what the word I want is. Unintimidating. That's the word. It's big, big stuff. You know, you're thinking about big things, but the way that you structure your pages, it really does invite the writer in to not feel afraid, to not worry about what to put on the page or how it looks or how it sounds or all of those things that, you know, some of us might get worried about. And then that's what brings that forward movement. I love that you had forward movement in there, because that's what I was missing in my journal. And that's what I think your pages do really well. They just get you to think a little bit differently, a little outside the box. For me, a little more creatively too, because of the way that they're set up and the things that you're prompting. So I'm excited to reveal today to everyone what we had, what we've created, and all of the thinking that went into it. So I think we should go there. Do you?
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait. Another set of super colorful pages with lots of different perspectives.
Yes.
Yes. So let's do it.
Let's do it. So listeners, so you know, after our first episode, after I kind of put the bug in Christie's ear that I think this would be really fun to do, we talked through Voxer. We did some voice notes. We got together live on Zoom and tried to think through what a shared collaboration might look like, what a journal page specifically related to reading and growing and learning and stretching from our reading into our writing life could look like. And we talked about a lot. We had a lot of different options that we kind of threw up into the air, and we ended up in a direction that neither of us expected, which was really fun because it was such a unique page. And we ended up thinking about how to really explore and think through our reading rules. I'm still not quite sure how we got there, but if we connect the dots back, it was a really cool conversation. Do you want to start by talking a little bit about how we got to this reading rules page and give us a little preview?
I would love to. I was actually looking back through our correspondence yesterday just to refresh my own. It's funny. Again, like writing all of I did a lot of journaling of our discussions, which was really helpful in going back to figure out how we got here. So there you go. Journaling saves the day once again. I remembered that we talked about, I had asked you when we talked about the collaboration, again, and I mentioned this in the last podcast too, is that I'm always trying to push the boundaries of what journaling can be and to try to discover the unexpected details. So I had asked you what, about your own reading experiences and your own reading practices. And then you, very, very serendipitously, you just recorded a podcast on your bibliotherapy practice. So you referred me over to that. So I listened to it, and I made a list of 4 things from your bibliotherapy podcast that I thought maybe we could look into a little more deeply, because it really did reflect a really unique and interesting part of your reading practice, and the way that you explore what you read and the way you expand the boundary. What I loved about it was the way you expand the boundaries of your own reading practice, to see where it can take you. And so I made a list of 4 things to discuss, and as far as I remember, we only got to number 2. Because there were so many things that we could talk about. And the thing that we started talking about from your bibliotherapy was, in that episode, you really talked about making that process your own and giving yourself permission to do it in the way that serves you best. And we started talking about how we often hinder ourselves by these rules, maybe that that we've been, by rules, especially around reading and handling books, rules maybe that teachers had told us, or had shared with us, or had enforced in the classroom when we were just starting to learn how to read, and ones that we picked up along the way that we didn't realize were limiting us. So we talked about, and then this is the other part of, of journaling and and reflection that's fun, is what would happen if we broke some of those rules.
Yes.
And those are and so that those are perfect, those are wonderful topics to explore in a journal, where so in journaling, journal is a wonderful place to try new ideas on for size, to put your ideas on, to clarify your ideas by putting them into words without having to implement them yet. You can experiment in your journal. You can do a lot of what if, and then step by tiny step begin to experiment outside of your journal, right? So that, that reflective mindset that you develop in your journal can serve you outside your journal as well. And I know that's a huge topic for you as well, is how the reading that you're doing, in the books that you're doing, how can you take what you're learning out into your real life? I know you talk about that all the time in your podcast. So that's my memory of how we got here, and how to merge, or how to expand a reading practice and a journaling practice at the same time.
Yes, that's what I love about these pages, that we'll describe it next, that listeners can have a visual of what we're talking about, but there are essentially 2 pages, and they are focused on our reading rules, but they do have lots of flexibility that we'll get to. But so listeners, if you can imagine this gleaming white page, and you've got these beautiful, colorful, stacked boxes all over both of them. It's so beautiful. There is one page that helps us to think about our reading rules. What are our rules for our reading life? How did we make them? How did we get there? And then a second page of, what if we break them? What if we break them? Like, what rules did we just pick up just because? What rules were we taught? What rules did we happen to adopt that we don't really want to have as our reading rules anymore? And so these 2 pages help us to really take stock of what our conscious or unconscious reading rules are and where they came from. But then it helps us think about if they serve us, if they don't serve us, what might come of breaking them or rethinking them, and how can that just get us to open up our reading lives even more. Now, Christie, when you sent the draft of this over to me, you asked, what are your thoughts? What should I change? And I went, do not change a single thing. These pages are bright and beautiful and colorful, and all sorts of reflections are stacked one another. Can you talk a little bit about the design you created for this printable?
So first and foremost, again, was looking back on our discussion and trying to. So another thing that I try to do in my journal pages is, it's really simple, but just thinking things through from beginning to end, thinking through a thought from beginning to end. And I really do use kind of the theory behind reflection as my structure, as my guide. So, what is the thing? Identifying, noticing what's happening around us. So noticing our rules, identifying our rules, figuring out what they mean to us. And this is, and then, from our discussion, from what you suggested too, was like, how do they serve us? Do they serve us? If so, how do they serve us? If they don't, how do they not serve us? So kind of following through with the making sense of what we're doing. We know what we're doing, but sometimes we don't take a step back and think, okay, why do we do it that way? Does that help us or not? And then ending, because reflection is very action oriented, is what are we going to do with that information? So the very first prompt on the page is all about kind of the what, like identifying the rules, noticing the rules. The central portion of the page is making sense of them. Where did they come from? what do we use them for? What else do we have on here? How do they impact our reading experience? And then the last part, and then and then together we threw in a fun one, like what's an exception to your rule? Getting to thinking things through from different perspectives, to looking from the inside out of the rule and then looking from the outside in. Or vice versa. And then the last prompt is action oriented. What are you going to do going forward? What are you going to do with this? I'm a huge believer in, really small, manageable, achievable steps that, iteration, improving, step by step. So what's one thing that you can take forward? What's one idea that you might try out in your reading experience? And then, and see how it goes, because you can also, the idea being that you can follow that up. So, reflection is really a loop. So you take an idea out into the world with you for something that you might change, a little tweak that you might make. And then that becomes your next thing that you reflect on. So what happened when you did that? Think that through. What did it mean to you? How was it meaningful? And then what are you going to do next? And you have this loop, this kind of upward spiral, of experiencing, learning from that experiencing, taking information into the next experience with an eye to improvement. So you're always getting, journaling is a process of becoming, right? So you're always getting a little bit closer to becoming that person that you can be through that reflecting you do in your journal. And I mean, reading is such a perfect subject for this because there's so many parallels, right, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there really are. And I love how you described that, because each page really does take you on this little miniature reflective journey of the what and the meaning piece, and then so what? So what are we going to do about it? And then moving from there. So taking that little risk on the page to think differently then moves to your reading life to help you think differently about your reading, which then, of course, impacts your actual life. So it's this beautiful step, I guess, this beautiful journey of reflection. We keep saying it, but because we both just love the idea of reflection. But I loved what you said about it. It's a way to become. It's becoming. It's helping you to do that. And I think these pages, especially, are really helpful because a lot of the rules that we have for ourselves, and this could be reading rules, writing rules, life rules, whatever rules, even though we're talking about reading rules today, a lot of them are unwritten and they're unconscious, and they're things that we do or things that we believe or things that we make ourselves do that we don't even realize we're doing it, because that's just the way we do things, or that's what we've been taught. And so I thought it'd be fun. Let's think for a minute about some of our own reading rules. And, I have personal reading rules. I'm also, I'm an educator. And so I teach reading rules, right? Which is a whole nother conversation of how we do that and who's right about what those rules are. I would say when I think about my rules that I have for myself, a lot of them definitely came from childhood and from my teachers and how readers were supposed to be. So I knew that readers didn't judge books by their covers, right? Which is a really hard one always for me to break, because I am so enchanted by the whole book cover process. Another reading rule for me, it's really hard for me, this rule, although I tell others to do it all the time, it's really hard for me to abandon a book without reading a particular amount of pages and not feeling that. And I also have a rule, that print books are better than anything else, even though I do enjoy my ebooks and the occasional audiobook. But it was an experience just to sit down and think about my reading rules, because I had to dig a little deeper and wonder, why do I believe that? So I just spewed off a couple of my reading rules. What were some that came to mind for you in your reading life?
I had such a similar experience to you. I really had to think really carefully about it. I actually even found it a little bit, it touched some sensitive spots for me. because I
Good
like to
journaling
think,
does, right?
yeah, I like to think that, as I think most people, I like to think that the things that I do make sense, and that they, that I have a good reason for everything. And so, that's when I look at my reading rules, that's not always true. And so I so enjoyed the process of looking at them, because as much as I think that I reflect on these things, this was something I really hadn't
Yeah.
and reflected on before. So my one big one is one book at a time.
Oh, oh,
um,
good one. So your rule is that you must just read one book at a time?
yes. I will so for whether like for work or pleasure. So I will sometimes have more than one book. If one is work related and one is pleasure related, then I will allow myself not to do that. But especially for work, one book at a time. And the
I
other
share that
one,
rule, by the way.
yeah.
I share that rule. I have a really hard time juggling different books unless it's a personal read and a professional read.
Yeah.
But when characters get muddy in my mind,
Yeah,
it
like,
goes downhill.
do you know why you do the one book at a time? Do you have
You know, I think growing up, I always heard, right, you had to finish that one so you could go borrow the next one or buy the next one.
Yeah,
But now as an adult, I really do notice it's harder for me to keep my story straight and
yeah,
to really get invested in one without having it be at the expense of the other. And I totally admire people who seem to be able to juggle two, three, four books.
yeah.
But it's just not the way my brain works, I don't think.
Oh, and I discovered that I'm exactly the same. That actually that I need that rule. um, and for the same thing, it's to be able to keep on track. Like I was saying to myself, it keeps me focused on the book, and it keeps me from um, like what I think is very similar. I don't want to mix up sources. I don't want to mix up theory. I want to make sure that I remember which theory came from which source, and that I understand it fully before I add to it. So I approach this page thinking that maybe it was a rule that I hadn't thought a lot about, and that maybe I should reconsider. But the more that I wrote about it, the more I realized, actually, no, it is one that really serves me very well. So then when I did the second page, the breaking the rules, I specifically said, I'm not going to put that one in there because I know that I want to keep that one. I'm going to work on different rules.
Yeah.
So some of the other rules was, well, the big one was, don't ever write in a book.
I have that one down too.
And that was one I was taught. That was the one, from the page of the breaking the rules. One rule you were taught to follow: don't ever write in a book. And that does not serve me well. That particular, in my reading professionally, that's a really tough one for me to break. I'm still working on that actually, but I need to break that one.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I have that rule too, but I kind of have a disclaimer. So I can, you know, I can write in the books, especially if they are professional books. I almost expect myself to have the highlighter, to have, all the marginalia in the margins, to have my beautiful sticky flags and my book darts and all of the things. But I definitely had a harder time, had a harder time writing in my fiction books. I felt like professional books, they invite reflection and critique and assimilation and all of those brain processes because we're trying to learn. In the fiction book, I found it a little bit harder to do, mainly because I'm borrowing them. I got to remember which
Yeah,
books are mine and which books are the libraries.
yeah,
But I am getting better at in a fiction book, even if it's as simple as highlighting the quote instead of just putting a sticky note,
yeah,
or writing in the margins about a character. I'm pushing myself there. I'm pushing myself. So that rule came from childhood. You don't ever write in your books, right? Because you had to
yeah,
share them all when you were in school. And that is one that I am happily trying to break for sure.
yeah. Yeah. What about another one I came across too that I didn't expect to find was reading from beginning to end, do you ever jump around in your books?
No.
Do you let yourself, so there are lots of books that I just finished one, that some of the chapters really applied to what I was looking to the research I was doing, but some really didn't. And I forced myself to read the ones that didn't, thinking maybe that there might be something in there that would be useful to me. And there weren't. And it was a lot, and I spent a lot of time maybe that I didn't need to spend.
Yeah, I think we might be reading twins, Christy, because I am very similar. For some reason, I don't know if this is from childhood. I think it's just because, I am in Gretchen Rubin's term, I'm an upholder and I'm a
Yep.
completionist. And if I start it, I need to finish it. So I have a really hard time abandoning books, and I have a really hard time not going in the order that the author wanted me to go in. So I will skim and I will read a little bit lighter, but I still will make myself go from beginning to end. And that could be a fiction book, it could be nonfiction, it could be anything. That is a rule that's really hard for me to break, and I feel guilty when I'm trying to break it. And there's no reason to, but
Yeah.
it is just, yeah, I'm with you there. I struggle with that, and I'm not quite sure why. Have you figured
Yeah.
out why?
And so that I put in my same as you in my just because. I'm not sure. I don't think anyone ever told me that I must do that. I think that came somewhere along the line from me. And I think it's almost like respectfulness. I totally agree with what you said about the author intended for them to be in this order. So we should trust that the author, has this is that this is the appropriate way to read it. But I guess, and then this is what I loved about the breaking the rules page is then you really have to think about, so how is this book useful to me? Like what am I trying to get out of it, right? And how am I standing in my own way?
Yes.
And if I like when and like there's so many different ways to look at it. When I produce something, like if someone decided to do part of a page and not a full page, that's okay by me. That's them making it their own, right? Like that's what you want. That's what I want from my work, is that people will that they will use my work to develop a practice that serves them the best that it can. And if there are parts of my work that don't serve them, then I have no expectations. Please then use the things that work for you and discard the things that don't. And I bet I wonder if maybe some writers would feel the same, like if they would be upset, for example, that we didn't.
Right.
So it really made me think, again, like what are my own feelings around books, around handling books, around reading, and how do they serve me? And by what I got out of these pages is that by really looking carefully at that, it helps me loosen the grip that some of those rules have on me. And when I look at them, like I said, like from their perspective and from my perspective, that helps me to say, what, and again, we can experiment. So the next book I read where I run into that, the book will still be there. I can always go back and read it from beginning to end if I feel that I need to do that. But this is a great opportunity to experiment, to see how there are a lot of feelings involved in the rules that we make. And those really bubbled up for me as well. So really being thoughtful about, how it feels to experiment in this way, and then making sense of that in your journal as well. So boy, this one went a little deeper for me than
I love
had
it though.
expected.
I love it. And I'm hoping that as listeners are listening, they're probably thinking, oh yeah, that's my rule. Or, oh, wait a minute. No, that's not my rule. I'm hoping that it's getting them to think about what their reading rules are, if they know where they came from, if they want them in the first place, if it's one they want to get rid of. I'm hoping us going
Yep.
back and forth about ours will get them thinking about theirs. But I do have to ask one question. I need to know
Sure.
about one more reading rule, that if you have
Yeah.
this one or not. Are you a bookmark kind of gal, or do you allow yourself to dog ear a page?
I'm a bookmarker all the way. I am a 100% marker. I just don't like the look of the folded page for myself. I would not, I would never, whatever works for another person obviously is. How about you?
Oh, see, and you just said that so nicely. Whatever works for anyone. In my head, I thought, oh, thank goodness she doesn't compare the page of her books. I am a bookmark kind of gal the whole way. I collect them. I love them.
Same.
I don't know again if it's like a respect kind of thing, but I try desperately to never fold that page. I will
Yeah,
put in, you know, a receipt, a gum wrapper, anything else that I could get my hands on to hold my
yeah,
page. And that definitely came from childhood. I remember my elementary school librarian giving us the whole lesson on how to take super good care of your
yeah,
books. And if we wouldn't fold over a part of our friend, we wouldn't fold over a part of our book. I can
yeah.
distinctly remember sitting on the rug with that. So I just had to sneak that in there and
But they, I mean, I think that also, again, like that really reflects how I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm making too many assumptions, but how we feel about books. Like for me, books are so precious, really. And I do have a lot of respect for how much work goes into creating it from all the different, you know, from the writers to the editors to the artists who design, you know, who design them to the process of making them. It's it's such a precious, you know, the end result is so precious to me. It's not just for me, it's not even just bookmarking. Like it's how I care for my books too, that they're all in pretty good can I take pretty good care of them.
yeah, same here. And you know, this year, 2023, I challenged myself to complete what I call my bookish hashtag 23 and 23, which is I want to attend either in person or virtually 23 different bookish related events from
Oh,
either an independent bookstore or a library, just to get closer to the book world that I love so much. And as
yeah,
I've done that, it just all the pieces kind of fell in place as you just spoke. As I've gotten closer to it and I've learned the hundreds of things that go into actually putting a book into readers' hands, I think you're right. I think a lot of my rules are either becoming stronger or
mm-hmm.
are shifting as I learn more about the behind the scenes and what actually has to take place for a reader to truly just have the book in their
Yeah,
hands. I think you're right. I think that's exactly where a lot of my reading rules are coming from, is that respect and that preciousness of the book. Oh, mic drop, Christy.
there's
So, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and that like that's what I love about this is what I love about, well, collaborating with you has been wonderful, but this is what I love about collaborations and um, taking the journal process in new directions, and is just that the depths that you can reach, you know, and I know as this is important to you as well, but the ways that um, thinking on the page can really impact the way that you live outside of your journal, away from your journal, away from the books that you read, and that is amazing to me. And that's, you know, that's why first and foremost I really do consider journaling a tool for living the best, you know, for becoming the person you know you can be, for making the most of your experiences, for deepening your experience of the world. Journaling is such a wonderful tool.
Yeah. And that's why I think I love this page even more, because of the flexibility that it could give journalers. So we're talking about our reading rules, but we could have the same conversation around our rules for writing, our rules for eating, our rules for gardening, you know, whatever the topic is, we would all benefit from a little bit of reflection of what we do and why we do the things we want to do and what we might want to do differently, all from just one journal page. So I'm curious, how do you hope readers knowing that readers could be writers and all of the other things, how do you hope that they'll use this page and take that into inspiration for their actual life?
I think, I mean, you've already you've said it, so beautifully. To me, it's really about um, the thoughtfulness around the rules um, uh, that we have for ourselves, and that we follow. And that was my huge takeaway from these pages was to as much as I feel like I'm already thoughtful about my rules, about why I do the things I do, is to really dig into that, and to continue to be thoughtful, in small steps, but about the things that I do. And I think, yeah, just to identify. And the other thing too is to be mindful, is to look for those rules too. I think one thing that these pages could do, is to help us see. So we see that you and I just had a huge discussion about all these different rules that, like, and some of the ones that you brought up are rules that I follow that I didn't even that I hadn't thought
Didn't
about
know.
when I did these pages. So I think one thing these pages could do out in your world is maybe to be mindful, help you maybe, the more you notice, the more you notice, sort of thing. So if you're thinking about your reading rules, maybe that will could also help you be more on the lookout for other kinds of rules that you have in your life, that maybe serve you really well, that need some reaffirmation. That you, in your journal, you can reaffirm why this is so important to you, why this matters to you, so that you can stand behind that rule for yourself, and even if it's, for example, difficult, or even if it's uncomfortable at times, knowing why it's important to you may help you to continue to use it as a guide, and then also, to notice the rules that aren't serving you well, and if you notice them in your reading life, maybe that will, I hope that will also open your mind to other areas. So yeah, doing this exercise with reading is a great first step.
Right. Because, our reading lives essentially are low stakes, right? When you think about
Yes, yeah,
all
great,
the other
yeah.
life decisions that we have, figuring
Yeah.
out the rules for our reading lives is a relatively safe place to start, and thinking about, why do I do the things that I do? And do I want to keep doing them? And when we build that muscle a little bit, maybe we start with our reading life, and then we go to our writing life, and then we go to some other aspect of our life. That muscle memory, that confidence, that just that feeling that you can do a reflection
Yeah.
like that. You can change gears and you can break rules if you want to, right? Without anybody else's permission. I think that snowball effect of starting with something small could just have this really wonderful impact on the other larger aspects of our lives too.
Yes.
So maybe starting with, one beautiful, colorful, reflective printable that really could just change everything if we kept doing this kind of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I couldn't have said it better. Absolutely.
Okay, well, listeners, you can get your hands on a copy of these beautiful, brightly colored, cheerful Reading Rules printables by heading to the show notes for the episode. You can head over to my website at alitlife.com and pop in your email there, but also find Christie. She's at christiezimmer.com, and you can not only get this page on her website, but the many, 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 many other journal pages that could spark a really wonderful journaling habit. It's the start of summer. It's the perfect time to pick up a notebook, your favorite gel pen or your favorite Sharpie or whatever it is, and head outside and do a little bit of reflecting. Christie, is there anywhere else they can find you on social media, or anything else you'd like to share?
I am also on Pinterest. I have you can find all of my pages there as well, and links to where you'll find them on my website. I also have a newsletter. If you go to christiezimmer.com, it's right there on the front page, a link to sign up for my newsletter. And if you're interested in what I'm doing behind the scenes, if you're interested in what we've discussed today, what I'm thinking about while I'm creating journal pages, I also tend to release new journal pages there on my newsletter before I post them on the website. So you might get a little a treat, a gift journal page before it's available anywhere else. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to sign up for my newsletter.
I do too, because it is a treat. It is a treat to see those emails come through. And not only do you see the beautiful pages, but you often give us the backstory of how and why it came to be, which I find fascinating too. So I urge everyone to sign up. It's this little joyful drop that pops into your inbox. Oh, good. I'm glad you shared that. Well, Christie, thank you. As always, it is so much fun to have a conversation about all of this. This was round 2. Who knows? Maybe round 3 will be in the future as we keep talking and collaborating. And listeners, I hope you let both of us know what you think about these pages. What are your reading rules? How and why did they come to be? How are you going to keep them? How are you going to break them? And how did a reflection like this maybe spark other movement in your lives as well? I know we would both love to hear about it. And hopefully you're going to spend the rest of the day thinking about this in the back of your head as you keep going on about your daily living. So Christie, thank you again. Thanks so much for being here. We loved having you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an awesome chat. Loved it.
Oh, see you next time.
Great.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing lives, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. But one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks so much for listening.